Right, let's talk about abortion. Hi! Abortion is wrong, and I often wonder if anyone truly believes that it's right. It is, after all, the systematic murder of unborn human beings. Whatever you believe about the stages of development, about viability, sentience, it is a human being, and abortion is the intentional killing of that unique human life. This is the NHS page on what an abortion is. There are two main types of abortion: medical abortion or abortion pill, taking medicine to end the pregnancy. I really resent the language that is used. It minimizes the reality of an abortion, and it's purposeful. End the pregnancy. That is, end a life. That is, a human being in your womb. It is not referred to as a pregnancy. It is a living human being. You are pregnant with the living human being. But of course, the language is intentional. It is supposed to desensitize you to the reality of the abortion. And then there is surgical abortion, a procedure to remove the pregnancy. Again, remove the pregnancy, as if it's the same as removing a tumor or a mole. Medical and surgical abortions can generally only be carried out up to 24 weeks of pregnancy. At 24 weeks, the baby is considered viable, meaning it could survive outside of the womb. So the NHS goes on, in very limited circumstances, an abortion can take place after 24 weeks. For example, if there's a risk to life or there are problems with the baby's development, i.e., if you find out that the baby has or will be or might be born with a mental disability or a physical disability, you can then choose to end its life, to kill it, after 24 weeks. And it says limited circumstances. That could also include a change of mind. It could also include, say, if you couldn't have access to an abortion before 24 weeks for whatever reason. Maybe your family was stopping you, maybe something was preventing you. If you're in America, if you're in a state where you don't have access to abortion facilities, or whatever it might have been. Basically, if for whatever reason you were late to the party, that would be allowed, that would be excusable for you to then go ahead and have an abortion after 24 weeks. Not that 24 weeks is the appropriate measure of when it's okay and when it's not okay. So a medical abortion involves taking two different medicines to end the pregnancy. The medicines are prescribed by the hospital or clinic, and you usually take them 1 or 2 days apart. The pregnancy is passed, in brackets, comes out, through the vagina. Right, in other words, you give birth. You give birth to a dead baby. Yeah, you say it as it is, it's not so appealing, is it? This usually happens several hours after you take the second medicine. It does not need surgery or an anesthetic. It involves the following steps. You first take a tablet containing a medicine called that. This blocks the main pregnancy hormone. You take this tablet at the hospital or clinic and you'll be able to go home afterwards and continue your normal activities. You know, while your child is dying inside of you. Yep, just Normal activities, continue with your day as if nothing is happening. Usually 1 to 2 days later, you take a second medicine called misoprostol. You put the tablets under your tongue between your cheek and gum or inside your vagina. You can usually take the medicine at home if you're less than 10 weeks pregnant. If you're over 10 weeks, you need to take these tablets at the clinic or hospital. Within 4 to 6 hours of taking the second medicine, the lining of the womb breaks down, causing pain, bleeding, and loss of the pregnancy. It's not so much a loss as an intentional termination. Sometimes you need to take more doses of misoprostol to get the pregnancy to pass. Occasionally the pregnancy does not pass and an operation is needed to remove it. So what that means is when it says the pregnancy will not pass, sometimes it means that bits of the human being are still in your womb, and so surgery is needed in order to remove the parts of the human being's limbs, whatever it might be. And however small it is what it is. It's a human being. So yeah, you'd have to remove that from inside you. Surgical abortion involves an operation to remove the pregnancy from the womb. It may be done with local anesthetic to numb the cervix, conscious sedation where you're relaxed but awake. God knows why you would want to be awake during that. Deep sedation or general anesthetic where you're asleep. I would assume most people want to be asleep because they know what they're doing is horrific and they want no awareness of it. Most people having deep sedation will not remember anything and will not be aware during the operation. If you have a general anesthetic, you'll be fully asleep during the operation and will not remember anything. I don't know how accurate that is. Maybe you won't be conscious for the actual operation, but I highly doubt you won't remember what it is that happened during the operation. Maybe you won't remember the specific scene, but you'll be fully aware of what happened, and it will haunt you forever, unless you are devoid of any manner of conscience, or you remain in ignorance, to be fair. There are 2 methods of surgical abortion: vacuum or suction aspiration. This can be used up to 14 weeks of pregnancy. A tube is inserted into the womb through the cervix, the opening to the womb from the vagina, and the pregnancy is removed using suction. So you suck the baby out of your womb. The doctor may need to use special instruments to help remove the dead baby, depending on how many weeks pregnant you are. Vacuum aspiration takes about 5 to 10 minutes, and most women go home a few hours later. Dilation and evacuation, D&E. This is used after 14 weeks of pregnancy. It involves inserting special instruments called forceps through the cervix and into the womb to remove the pregnancy. D&E is usually carried out under sedation or general anesthetic. It normally takes about 10 to 20 minutes and you're usually able to go home the same day. You do not usually need to have any other tests or appointments after a surgical abortion or a medical abortion in hospital. If you have a medical abortion at home, you may need to have a special kind of pregnancy test or scan to make sure the job's done. If you have a medical abortion, you may have short-lived side effects from the medicines, such as diarrhea and feeling sick. You may have long-term side effects of, feeling sick mentally. You might have stomach cramps, vaginal bleeding. Sometimes vaginal bleeding after a medical abortion can last up to a month because the doctor has mashed you up inside. I think even after reading all of that, going through the details of the different kinds of abortion, I think this next bit is the bit that kind of made me really sick. So after an abortion, it says you can, take painkillers, paracetamol, whatever, use sanitary towels, pads, yada, 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 until the bleeding stops. And then it says, have sex as soon as you feel ready, right? So this is for the consumer, this is the driving force for pro-choice. And it's just so gross. It's so disgusting. You have this abortion, you go through this process, this invasive process. You kill this human being living inside of you. And then you go about your daily life as if nothing happened. And you just continue having sex because that's ultimately what you want. That's why you had the abortion. You don't want to disturb your life. You want to have the sex without the natural result of having sex. You want to separate the pleasure from the purpose. And then, you might have bleeding, you might have an infection because there's still bits of dead baby in you that are kind of just rotting inside of you because the doctor might have missed a limb or two. Yep. Any worries? Just give them a call. 111. Great. Good job. Healthcare. So that's what the healthcare overlords tell us about abortion. They rely on the people believing, because the doctors know, the doctors are fully aware. Scientifically, we know when human life begins. It begins at conception. This is not controversial. It's a human life. They rely on the consumers believing or accepting this false premise that life, or at least valuable life, life that deserves protection, life that deserves rights, begins at some arbitrary point along the stages of development or after birth. They need you to accept this premise so that they may sell you the abortion. Anything and everything for a profit. Whether we're talking about killing children in the womb or, mutilating them later on in life. Because transgenderism, this is a big moneymaker. Millions of babies are aborted every year. They need women to think that they're not killing a human being. They're not killing their child. They need them to think that the thing inside of them is nothing of value, that it is merely just like this vague clump of cells and has no worth, which is really an illogical point of view to have. But I think if you're in a desperate situation and that's what the experts are telling you, and maybe you don't have any other loving voice of reason around you, or maybe if you're being pressured to have the abortion, or you're scared, and rightfully, parenthood is scary, especially when you weren't you weren't ready for it, for lack of a better way to phrase that. So they rely on you being ignorant, and you accept the ignorance because you're scared, or you're pressured, or whatever. Or maybe you're just selfish. There are some women who just go for abortions and probably will have multiple abortions just out of pure selfishness. But an abortion is literally the merciless, torturous, intentional killing of a human life. And abortionists should be charged as career killers, murderers. They make a career, they make a profit from murder. Mothers, on the other hand, at least, broadly speaking, mothers should be properly educated about what abortion is, what their options are. And they should be guided through the pregnancy and encouraged to take that pregnancy to term with the security of family, whatever that family looks like. It may not be your actual biological family. It may be a family that is formed around you to support you through this, to do the right thing, the good thing. And young people need proper moral guidance when it comes to sex, when it comes to their own bodies, when it comes to how they treat the opposite sex, how we view the opposite sex, how we view marriage and children, and they need proper moral guidance. They don't need garbage sex ed classes that are based on, this kind of attitude where, look, you're going to have sex because, well, we're not bothered to morally guide you. So we know you're going to have sex. At the very least, use a condom. And so in the sex ed classes, or at least this is what I remember from my own high school education, they literally just taught us. I don't remember anything about the lesson other than they taught us how to put on a condom using a banana. That was it. Well, these days, they definitely don't need this garbage lie. I can't even call it sex education. It's not education. It's just lying. That men can be women, women can be men can have periods, men can get pregnant, but at the same time, no uterus, no opinion. Most women are told and believe that abortion is a women's rights issue, that the thing inside them is a ball of goo, a clump of cells, that it is ultimately less valuable than her own life, or than, the prospect of a successful career, or getting the guy she ultimately wants or thinks she wants. Because we also live in a society where women who have children and for whatever reason are not with the father, these women are deemed somehow less valuable as human beings or as potential partners for the future, which I think is really shallow. So that's what they're being told, that it's a ball of goo. And, they don't realize that this assertion undermines the whole right to life. This is a human rights issue. Does the human being in the womb deserve to live? That's the real issue. It's not about, does the woman have the right to choose? Wherever or whenever you decide to draw the line and say, this is the point where a human being gains value and has the right to be protected, heartbeat, conscience, first breath, whatever it is, saying that this thing or that thing is the thing that makes human life worth something, you 100% of the time run into two problems. When you decide that a human being gains value at some later point in life, whatever that point is, you actually forfeit the objective basis that you need to fight for any human right. A human being's right to life goes out the window. For human beings to have rights, objectively, without discrimination, conception needs to be accepted as the moment that you and I began to matter. When we entered into existence, fully human, conception is when that occurs. The basis for human rights is beyond any arbitrary measure. And the second problem is wherever you draw the line, you then have to be consistent with that line. You have to apply it consistently because you believe that that is the marker for human value. And so if it's a heartbeat for you, if that's when you think a human being ought to be protected and deserves to live, what about people who have a pacemaker? They rely on this external, unnatural force to cause their heart to beat. Does that mean we should leave them to die? Do they not deserve life because their heart can't function on its own? Or if it's consciousness, is it okay to stab a person in their sleep because they're asleep, they're unconscious? Or a person in a coma? Really problematic position to be consistent on. And then you have what is typically the same side, or on the same side of the argument of pro-choice, you have the transgender activists who claim that a baby knows they're trans in the womb. So you're just going to go ahead and systematically murder all of these trans babies. How does that fit? How does that hold up? That's not consistent. That's just convenient for you to argue that, to argue one thing at one time and another thing at another time. Moving on a little bit. Everyday conversations seem to fall into disarray from the get-go. Firstly, because the label pro-choice is misleading or incomplete. What is the choice that we're talking about here? Is the choice a virtue or is it a vice? Is it good or bad? Is it right or wrong? Summary so far. Abortion is literally murder. It's a moral issue, and it's not a matter of women's rights. Here is every argument that I am aware of coming from the pro-choice side. Numero uno. No uterus, no opinion. So does this reasoning, does this argument apply to trans women? Because as I said before, the trans-affirming side is typically on the same side as the pro-choice side, which on the one hand will say that trans women are women, never defining what a woman actually is. You know, men can have babies, down with biology, it's oppressive. While on the other hand saying if you don't have a uterus, you can't have an opinion on what a woman does with her body. So do they get to weigh in on the debate? Or can they not? Because they're men. Or can men have an opinion on abortion, on what a woman chooses to do with the baby inside of her? That's besides the point, just an initial thought. The real problem with this kind of thinking is that gender has nothing to do with a person's ability to judge whether or not something is morally right or wrong. Men can be correct on women's issues, vice versa. They don't have the lived experience of a woman, but they can still reason and think about and come to conclusions about, correct conclusions about abortion. And that isn't less valuable than a woman's opinion. And for the people in the US and the people in the UK who for some reason were super invested in American politics, outraged by the overturning of Roe v. Wade, you really don't get to make this argument. It doesn't make any sense because the thing was put into place in the first place by a group of men. The nature of someone's genitals is irrelevant. What's relevant is whether or not they're right. What's relevant is their argumentation. Evil things remain evil things, no matter who is pointing it out. You don't need a uterus to know that people shouldn't murder. It also wouldn't make sense to say this because the baby in your womb might be female. And so whose women's rights are we talking about here? We all make moral judgments all the time because there are some actions, there are some things in reality that we know violate the moral law. And to remain silent on these issues makes you complicit. Number B, what about rape and incest? Important to know, rape and incest make up an extraordinarily low percentage of abortions. So in conversation, I would only really entertain this question if we could both agree that all other abortions are bad. And it's not a petty point of view, it's actually quite reasonable, because the person is appealing to an exception to the rule. Or what's the rule? The question is only valid if the rule is present. All other abortions are wrong, except if you instead believe that, all abortions are basically to be made at the mother's or the woman's, you probably wouldn't refer to them as a mother, at the woman's discretion, that is okay and right, just as right as, say, a victim of rape, then there's no need to appeal to an exception or an extremity. And what it then reveals, what it becomes, is this gross attempt on your part, on the person arguing this, to use horrible crimes against a woman to then justify another horrible crime. Why? For convenience, to excuse the act and enable the continuation of irresponsible sexual decisions, which reveals, to me at least, that you don't care about the victims of rape and incest. You're using this violation of their personhood, of their body, to promote your political agenda. You're merely using them as a means to justify your despicable ends. You don't care about them. It's taking the marginal case and applying it to all cases. It doesn't make any sense. Rape is a crime. Rapists should be locked away for the rest of their lives, never to touch another human being again. Babies deserve not to be murdered. Murder is a crime. Taking a human life, that's a crime. A human being conceived in rape is not less valuable than a human being who was conceived consensually. I would like to hear a person actually argue this in the face of someone who was brought to term, whose mother was raped and decided to have the baby anyway and raise that baby, or if it was too difficult to raise the baby, then to give them up to a family who would be willing to raise and love that baby. I would like to see this despicable argument made to the faces of these human beings who were conceived in rape, that these men and women are less valuable because of the circumstance of their conception, undeserving of life. Nonsense. Stop it. Besides, the assumption that's being made here is that it's actually healthier, better for the woman who has suffered such a violation, that it is actually better for her to, continue the violence and kill the baby, kill the product of the violation. In reality, it's violence upon violence. All you do is you then transfer this guilt onto the woman who has felt as though, or has been encouraged to think, that the solution, the thing that will help her heal, is to rid herself, to kill this baby. All you're doing is making sure that she will go the rest of her life bearing that decision, bearing the weight of that decision, which was never her fault in the first place. You really mess with the woman's mind by doing so. You make her responsible for the death of this innocent human being, this human life in her womb, which may very well be the only redeemable aspect of what has happened to her. And you think she'd be better off crushing its skull inside of her, vacuuming its brains and limbs out of her, or poisoning it for it to then be born dead out of her. Yeah, that sounds super psychologically healthy. That sounds like she's going to really heal from what happened to her. Sounds like you're really concerned about the woman. Right, what about my body, my choice? I don't even know how this is still being used as an argument. So weak. It's literally not your body. And that's why it isn't your choice. It's a whole separate living human being. It's not a kidney, it's not a tumor, separate human being. If you truly believe that doctors, who know full well what is living inside you, it is a human being, they know that, have the right to practice and profit from the dismemberment, the poisoning, the crushing of the skull, the suctioning of this baby in your womb, convincing you all the while that it's good and right, you are either painfully ignorant or utterly narcissistic. Either way, the act is evil. The truth is, you forfeited your body when you made the choice to engage in sex with someone you had zero intention of having a baby with. That was the choice. You don't get to murder the natural consequence of the choice. You took the risk. You knew the risk. It didn't pan out for you. And now you are responsible. Both of you. What if the woman is not ready or equipped to have a child? I sympathize. Feeling this way could be due to perhaps, the father abandoning you because you're pregnant. It could be that you're quite young. It could be that, the father is present, but that both of you are just pretty scared and thinking, how are we even going to do this? Maybe you're financially unstable. So whatever the scenario is, firstly, I would say, if you're not already in the situation, if you're in the risk part, if you're having sex, whether with random people, with many people, with one person, in a relationship, out of a relationship, if you're having sex, this is to people who aren't pregnant yet. Sex is the procreative act. Sex perpetuates the human species. That's what it is. There's all this great pleasure and intimacy and unity that comes with it. But what it is procreation. And people have been sold this lie, and it's a really easy to believe lie, that you can separate the two. You can separate the pleasure from the purpose. This myth that sex can be casual or safe, and by safe we mean closed to life. In reality, and this is what marriage protects and nurtures, and it protects and nurtures women, actually. In reality, male-female sex results or is open to life. That is the purpose of sex. That is the function of it. That is the natural consequence of sex. You can't detach from it, nor should you. And when you choose to engage in the act, you open yourselves up to life. For these These young men and women who are playing house with your counterfeit husband, your counterfeit wife, or whoever you are, and in whatever manner you are having sex. If you get pregnant, or if you get someone pregnant, you don't just get to relieve yourselves of all responsibility by killing it. It's not even going to benefit you long term. Whatever lie you may be telling yourself. You know, I'm young, I need to focus on uni, I need to focus on my career. I can't have a baby now. Well, don't have sex. You know, if your reasoning is that you want to focus on something else, do that. More often than not, though, it's that you're lying to yourself and it's that you just want to have the sex without the commitment, the responsibility, the marriage. Now, like I said, that's really just aimed at people who haven't gotten pregnant yet. Get out while you have the chance. So it's not immediately helpful for a woman or a couple who is already in this mess, to whom I would say that abortion is not the solution. Whatever the obstacle is, whatever the problem you're facing is, whether that problem is single motherhood, whether that problem is that you feel that it's going to halt your life and, you know, you believe that that's going to make you bitter and unhappy, or if, you know, even just as a couple, you don't feel that you can manage practically, abortion is not the solution, and it will have a lasting effect on you, whether that is physically or psychologically. It's not this easy, quick fix that you're told it is, that you're encouraged to believe that it is. And at the end of the day, if you have any level of conscience, this is a human being we're talking about. And it's beautiful because it's come from you. Like, it's come from you. And as the woman, you are carrying this human being from wherever it's come from, you know. Speaking of the soul or the spiritual aspect, you get to be the vessel through which this life transfers from wherever we come from into this physical plane. That is a beautiful privilege. There is nothing more worthwhile as a person who wants to be in a relationship. Singleness is different. It's not this super simple solution. If abortion is on your mind, you have the wrong solution. There's adoption, there are pregnancy centers, there are churches, there are people who are willing and able to help you do the right thing and do what is best for you and this human being within you. There are other options, and those other options are better than abortion and far more worthy of your consideration. Right. Women should have the choice, even if it's the wrong choice. So this typically comes from a person who agrees that abortion is wrong, but they can't quite fathom taking away someone's choice, a woman's choice, to have access to this if that's what they want to do, even if personally they think that it's wrong. You know, they feel weird about making such a thing illegal, making it so that women are breaking the law if they have an abortion, which I can understand on an emotional level, you know, considering what we just talked about, you know, legitimate concerns and worries that a woman or a couple may be having when they find out that they're pregnant. Get married. Make it work. So women should have the choice, even if it's the wrong choice. This leads to the conversation of the fear of back alley abortions. We'll get to that later. Also leads to people screaming about unjustly prosecuting women who do seek abortions, which isn't representative of the pro-life position. No pro-lifer I've heard, and certainly not myself, would call for a woman to go to prison for having an abortion. The doctor should, 100%. They know what's going on, but the woman doesn't, often at least, doesn't bear the responsibility. She doesn't have the knowledge. She's relying on this expert to give her accurate information, and they don't. They minimize the act, they minimize the reality of it, and you're left with the consequences. You're left with the reality, not them. They're left with a profit. So I know abortion is wrong, but it feels wrong also to remove a woman's choice. How can it be good to force a person to have a baby that they don't want or can't take care of? Punishment isn't the goal. The goal of making abortion illegal is to primarily dissuade women from going for one, and to help them, to guide them to doing what is right for the baby, for this human life that you've brought into the world. But yeah, the doctor should 100% be imprisoned. Career killers, that's what they are. It's not healthcare. They know what they're doing. There's no claim to ignorance for them. For the mother, it's different. As for this idea that having a choice is good, even if the wrong choice is made, there are lots of bad choices that are also breaking the law, deserving of punishment, deserving of prison. And laws dissuade people from committing crime. Not all people, obviously. And so that's what that law would do. And we're perfectly okay with those. The choice itself isn't the virtue. The choice is a gift. Free will is a gift. But the virtue is one of two choices that you can make in any given situation. So what about the back alley abortion fears? So on the one hand, these so-called back alley abortions are this horrible thing we never want to return to. We never want to do that. We never want to put women through that. Well, on the other hand, you're saying, here, have these birth control pills, do-it-yourself abortions. They're being sold, promoted as being perfectly safe. There's nothing wrong with them. This doesn't make sense. The other side of the argument wants us to hold these two things simultaneously. And the argument is hypocritical. Women will have to resort to DIY abortions if abortions are made illegal. Simultaneously, DIY abortions are perfectly safe and ethical and everyone should do them. Pick a lane. So now the argument has some variations. Typically it goes something like this. Women will undergo abortions even if the procedure itself were to be made illegal. If abortions were forced underground, women would just be subjected to the dangers of back alley abortions. If abortion is kept legal, we can at the very least guarantee women the safety of regulated medical care. So the argument implies that the legality of abortion ensures the well-being of women, and that outlawing abortion doesn't help to reduce the number of abortions that would take place anyway. So since pro-lifers maintain that all life is valuable from conception to natural death, the accusation that our political position or moral position leads to the death of the mother in addition to the death of the unborn child puts us in an obvious predicament. Or, it would if this argument, stood true to reality. So firstly, morally, we wouldn't want anyone to die, whether it's the woman or the baby, to die from either legal or illegal abortions. But the reality is that abortion can never be made safe for the baby. And it flies in the face of justice to keep a procedure legal just so that it's safer for a bigger person to kill a smaller person. Secondly, the number of women who died from illegal abortions in the US prior to Roe v. Wade is more often than not grossly exaggerated. One 1981 study found that prior to the legalization of abortion, the number of illegal abortions that took place was about 98,000, or about 10% of what the total number became after Roe v. Wade. According to the CDC, only 39 women died from illegal abortions and 24 women died from legal abortions prior to Roe v. Wade in 1972. Legal abortion is no guarantee of women's health. The progress or the development of medical care having grown from what it used to be, of course, at least in some aspects, quite backwards in other aspects. The care that's offered to pregnant women, the care that would be offered to women seeking an abortion is different, is better than what it used to be. And that would be the deciding factor on the safety of the woman. In 1960, 13 years before Roe v. Wade, the then medical director of Planned Parenthood said this: "Abortion is no longer a dangerous procedure." Remember, this is 13 years before it was made legal. Whether therapeutic or illegal is in the main no longer dangerous because it is being performed by physicians. So they were being performed by physicians. They were not dangerous. This is the then director of Planned Parenthood. Their whole business is abortion. In the UK, on the 30th of March 2020, that's just a week after the first national lockdown, the government implemented the most radical change to abortion since 1967. That is, at-home abortion. And for the first time in UK history, women could legally access abortion pills. They could self-administer these life-altering pills from the comfort of their own homes. They could perform their very own back alley abortion. Every year in the UK, over 200,000 babies are aborted. In the first 3 months of the telemedicine service, there were over 23,000 home abortions. That's over 250 a day. Every month, 36 women make calls to 999 seeking help for complications arising from these DIY abortions. Every month, 250 women using abortion pills at home will require hospital treatment. And the message from the abortion industry is that all of this service, that it's safe, it's ethical, and it's effective. So basically what we see with regards to the whole back alley abortion fear is abortion is dangerous. Whether it's illegal or legal, complications will arise. We also see that this myth of women having to seek these dark, dingy, weird rooms, that they'd have to resort to this purposefully ominous sounding practice. Like, it's not true. It's just not true. These people are physicians. You go to your doctor or a physician, whether it's legal or illegal, and this was happening prior to it being illegal. So if abortion is made illegal, it's not going to cause women to start dying in gigantic horrible numbers, because it didn't before. Why would it now? When, on the other hand, again, you're trying to hold these two things up simultaneously. When on the other hand, you have telemedicine, you have these abortion pills being sold to you, promoted to you as perfectly ethical, safe, and effective. But then you scream and shout about how, women are going to have to resort to these back alley abortions. Again, pick a lane. Illegal or legal abortion has risks to the mother's life. The purpose of making it illegal is to dissuade women from this terrible practice and to guide them and help them through the good, right practice, which is to bring the baby to term. To allow that life to live, because you have no right to take it away. And even if it was true, and this is just me personally, even if it was true that that women would be seeking these poor conditions to have their abortion if it was made illegal, even if that was true, which it's not, but if it was true, for me, I see no moral value, I see no moral high ground in ensuring the murder of a baby happens in the safest manner possible. That is backwards. So, if anything, the making it illegal will dissuade women from having an abortion, and hopefully both men and women will think more carefully about who they sleep with if it is illegal to have an abortion. It just makes you more conscious of your actions when something is illegal. So, what do we conclude? Killing babies isn't the solution to your bad sexual decisions. Me or any pro-life person saying make better choices before or after the fact is not us being anti-choice, simply pointing out the purpose of free will, or just the natural function of it. You choose this or that, and it is better to choose the good, right thing because morality exists. And the right to life is the foundation upon which all other rights or freedoms rest. Every person from the moment of conception has that objective right to life. It is a protected right, or it should be a protected right. Yet in the UK, since the passing of the Abortion Act in 1967, nearly 10 million babies have been killed in the womb. And that's almost the entire population of London. Abortion discriminates against the unborn child and its right to life. These human beings are robbed of dignity and recognized value. And there are other ways that abortion discriminates intentionally: race, sex, disability. And so to all of you victim status fiends who pretend to care about discrimination, about vulnerable groups, you ignore the epitome of vulnerability, of innocence, and you promote instead the systematic killing of that group. My name is Christ Defender. I defend the Christian faith. I answer questions and criticisms concerning Christianity. If you like what I do and you would like to support me, there are 2 links in the description box. One will take you to my Patreon, where you can support monthly. Big help. The other is a link to my merchandise, which you can have a little scroll through here. It's pretty good stuff. I've got a one with a circular definition on, that's new. And I've got probably one of my most favourite verses that I think apply, or should really be your favourite verse and every Christian's favourite verse, because it really just describes what it is we're supposed to be doing here when we say that we're Christian and we follow Jesus. It's great, it's good stuff. Or you can get the Christ Defender hoodie, and represent. Okay, bye.